Awesome. We are live, and I'm really, really excited for today because you guys might recognize this famous guest of ours. She's all over social media, Miss Ali Garced. Good morning.
Good morning, Micah. Thank you for having me on for a second time. I'm stoked to be here.
Well, you were so amazing the first time that we had to have you on for a second time. So,
Everyone
and
was
then
like, encore.
encore, right? Well, when Mr. Numbers guy Ruben Garcia recommends you, then that means you definitely know your numbers because he's a numbers guy all the way around. So I'm excited. So Ali, let's kind of go ahead and dive into it. I know that, for those of you, please stick around because we're going to be diving into numbers. Ali's got it broken down in terms of her hourly worth with working with buyers, working with sellers, with referring to other agents, and building out this massive team that goes across state borders. So I'm really excited to kind of dive into that. Did you get a chance to share to your social media while we're doing a quick introduction?
Oh, yeah, I should do that right now,
Yeah.
actually.
Go ahead and share it. That way it'll show up on your page as well. It should be set to public on my Facebook account.
So I go on
Go to my
my,
Facebook and then it should be set to public so you can go ahead and share it.
oh, okay.
That way we
Should have
give
hired.
everybody the opportunity to watch.
Awesome. Okay, pop up. Here you are. Share.
And as always, you got a much cooler background than I do. There's like not a wall in this house without a window.
Yeah, I'm in like a den area. Okay, share now.
Perfect. Good to go?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, Ali, let's go ahead and dive into it. For those that maybe missed the first interview, which it's on our Facebook, it's on YouTube, so you can definitely go check it out. But for those that missed it, just give just a brief background of how long you've been in real estate, how many years, what your production's been, and how's it going for you so far.
Yeah, so I have been an agent for shy of 2 years. In July, I'll hit 2 years, or August, one of the two. So a year, more than a year and a half. And my background before that was I was active duty Air Force for a decade, where I was a special agent for the Office of Special Investigations. And so I went from being a special agent to a real estate agent, and I love it. I should have
Special
left.
agent. What are you talking about?
I'm so special. I should have left earlier. The Air Force, I say, was holding me back. So I'm super glad that I became a realtor because originally, just like I'm sure a lot of clients think, I also was under the incorrect assumption that all realtors did was just open doors and they showed properties and they talked about how nice kitchens were. And all of that was not for me.
Right.
um, I realized that it's a whole business. Like being a realtor is a business, and there's KPI and there's numbers to track, which we'll get into. That's when I realized, okay, let me do this full time. So my first year I did 20 transactions. This year I'm on track to do more than that. And I realized the power of leverage really early on. So I hired a TC starting at transaction number two. I hired an assistant, and I still didn't have enough like time to do everything that I needed to do. So I started growing the team, and I say team with quotes because it's not a formal team. There are no team splits. Um, and so I gave them like all the checklists, like all the resources possible. And now that's like a form of leverage for me and a way to see them succeed too. So now our group is almost 30 agents and we're in several states. We're not just in Tucson, Arizona.
That's amazing. I mean, 2 years in the business, she's already growing her organization of 30 plus agents, and I'm sure that's just going to continue to grow throughout the year. Um, so you talked about leverage, which I love that you mentioned that because honestly, that's one of the biggest places that I think single agents get kind of stuck. If we want to do better financially, right? Typically in real estate, that means sell more homes, help more buyers and sellers, which means unfortunately more time away from our home life, our family life, etc. So the only way to buy that time back is through leverage, and leverage in terms of knowing your hourly worth, hiring out, you mentioned admin assistants and TC, which stands for transaction coordinator. So your job is strictly to go out there to get the deal, to secure it, and then kind of pass it off. How did you know so early on, I mean, brand new to real estate, that you needed to get a TC and assistant help, and then now start leveraging other agents as well?
Yeah, I became obsessed with tracking how much I make per hour because when I was leaving the military, I wanted to make sure that it was going to be an increase in salary, not a decrease. Well, I say salary, obviously money.
Right.
I didn't want to leave something that paid pretty well because I was a major in the Air Force and it pays pretty well. So I didn't want to do that, leave that in order to then make less and work harder, potentially. So I became obsessed with tracking how much each activity, like cost, or made me. And so I started that on my very first transaction when I did my own paperwork. It took me 3 hours just to find all of the documents.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
was like, this cannot be it. Like, I could have spoken to how many other potential clients during the 3 hours that I was looking for documents. So immediately I was like, this will never happen again. I'm going to hire that out because at a cost of $400 per transaction, um, they have everything ready to go and they're better at it than me. They're faster and they can make sure it's more accurate. Like as an agent, I knew that obviously we need to know the contract. We need to know how to negotiate. But do we actually need, my opinion, do we actually need to know if that those initials were in the right spot? Was it the husband or the wife that was there? Like the TC has that down. Pay someone else a minimal cost to do that at the end of the transaction, and it was a no brainer for me. So at that point, I started tracking how many people I talk to, because Ruben is really big on that. So I have my tracker there. And I started tracking how much time am I giving to buyers? How much time am I giving to sellers? Because everyone says listings are the way to go. And listings are actually, I found that to be the exact opposite in my business, and everyone's different. And referrals, I started tracking how many hours I was working with each referral just to make sure, always tying it back to the old military days, am I making more than I was in the military? And it was kind of like just to prove to myself, did I make the right choice? And I did by far.
I love it. Well, I think you made the right choice. Obviously, we love working with you. So I love that you acknowledge that, okay, this is not my area of strength, right? Which sometimes we've got to put our ego to the side to understand and realize that there's somebody that can do the paperwork better. And frankly, who honestly probably enjoys this side of the business. Because let's be
Yeah.
honest, some people don't enjoy going out and prospecting and getting the business. It sounds like that's something that you're good at. So pairing up with somebody that has opposite strengths of you is incredibly important in terms of leverage. Now, you mentioned knowing your hourly worth. And so I would imagine that that kind of stemmed from that salary that you wanted to match that you were getting from being in the military. Is that correct? So you're like,
Correct. Yeah.
okay, I have X amount that I need to make. Here's the amount of hours I'm going to put in every single week. How many weeks every single month? 52 weeks in the year. And is that kind of how you divide it out and say, okay, this is what I need to make in order to offset?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I'll say my number because I mean, military salaries are very public. Anybody can look it up. So, I was making $107,000 a year, in with Tucson, locality pay. Of course, if you're living in DC, you're going to get a lot more for housing allowance. Anyway, so I was making $107,000 in Tucson. And as I was like job searching and like looking at other possibilities, nothing else came close to 107 if I were to remain in Tucson.
Yeah.
So, but sales, is always a different story. Sales is just, I love it. I did not think that I would, but I love it. So then I wanted to make sure that my first year in the military, I at least came close to it, like comparing it to that $107,000. And by month 8 of me being a realtor, like my first 8 months in the business, I matched that. And so I made more. So at that, because I was going full speed, I'm still full time active duty Air Force. So at month 8, when I matched how much I was making in the military and when I was miserable in the military, that's when I knew, like, this is okay. I can take my foot off the gas, and the rest, all my prospecting, continued to come in. So I made 120 something my first year, and I was like, let's do this. Let's separate. Let's go.
So
Yeah.
you made 120 while you were still active duty, and that at that point that just kind of proved to you that you could kind of rip off the Band-Aid, if you will, and go all in. I think that's really important because I hear from agents all the time, especially newer agents that are just getting in the business. And, sometimes we need to keep our other job to make that transition. But I think attaching it to a number is what allowed you to make that transition in the first year. Because a lot of people, it takes years, but again, they don't have an ultimate goal of what that's going to look like. So you came in, you made $120,000 in your first year in GCI. What were those prospecting activities? I mean, how did you balance being active duty and then now prospecting and having a full-time real estate job as well?
Yeah, it was a lot. I will say it was my first 8 months of me being a realtor was unsustainable for me to continue doing that and the full-time active duty Air Force job. But I needed to prove to myself first, like, and I told my wife this too. This next year is going to be so intense. I need to learn the business. I need to get clients, and I need to make sure that I'm making the right choice. And she stood by me. She was like, "Hey, I'm here to support you any way that I can." And I was working nights. I was working weekends. Every single weekend, I was working. But also, being plugged into the military community is perfect for realtors, and especially if you know how to talk their language and like know the tempo and just know just certain like keywords, like you can talk their language. So it was a hindrance but also a help. And so I knew that at some point my Alex Hormozy said something like super good that struck with me, but pretty much it's at what point are you going to remain being miserable in a career that you don't like? It's after you just have to hit a certain point of low in order for you to realize this is it. I need to make a switch. But I didn't want it to be just emotional because I'm a very like numbers person. So my emotion came first. Like I need to leave my job, and then I needed to track it. So logically, I was like, okay, let's match my military income. So
Well, you're right. I mean, sometimes we have to have that pain to have the gain, right? And that's just unfortunately how we operate as human beings, right? I also like that you matched and made sure your personal and your professional goals were in alignment. So you mentioned letting your family know, hey, I'm going to have to go all in for the first 12 months. Do I have your support? And that's very much something Hamudi and I have always operated on. When I initially started with EXP 8.5 years ago, I literally told him, this is going to be a lot of work for very little pay in the very beginning. I either do it all 100% or I don't do it at all. But so I like that you had that conversation because I think a lot of people are afraid to have that conversation with your spouse, and it is a family commitment, right? So, now, in terms of, you talked about, okay, so actually Leslie here has a great question. She said, this is great. I'm not a numbers person, which I will say a lot of real estate agents struggle with this a little bit.
yeah.
Give me an idea to what to look at. So number one, you started with a goal in mind. I have to make X amount, and you divided that, I would imagine, by how many hours that you can commit to, and then knowing your hourly worth. So let's say for just sake of example, you said $107,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how many hours a week would you say that you were able to commit to real estate in your first year?
Hours per week I actually don't have, but it would be around 20.
So
Around
80
20.
hours a month, so 80 hours a month times 12, 960 hours total. So let's take that 170,000 or 107,000 divided by 960. So that puts you at $111, $112 an hour, give or take. So that's what you knew. And I think the other reason, and Leslie, for you watching, that's incredibly important to know, because when you have those power hours and those prospecting hours, and you're making calls and you're getting hung up on, or maybe you're door knocking and you're getting doors slammed in your face, which doesn't always happen, by the way. But when you know your hourly worth, now you can say, okay, I made $111 this hour, even if I just got
Yes.
100 no's, right? But for somebody, Allie, that's not a numbers person, where do they start? Besides,
Yeah.
okay, with more hourly worth, what's next?
Yeah. So I'll break it into like beginning agents that don't have any past transactions. And then I'll go into those agents that do have past transactions. That way they can look into their business first and then decide where to go from there.
Perfect.
So the beginning agents, the ones who don't really have any past transactions, you want to be. I'm sure that Ruben will allow me to share the tracker. Let me
He
pull up his
recommended
tracker.
you, so.
Okay. Awesome. So I have a tracker. It's a Google spreadsheet. So that way it's on my computer, it's on my iPad, it's on my phone when I'm on the go. Um, but I track every single contact attempt I make. And that's what I suggest that all new realtors do. Have a spreadsheet that literally says every single day of the week, every day of the week, all 7 days. Because if you don't have any transactions behind you and this is your full time job, work 7 days of the week. Contact attempts, that's your number one, right? And then also track how many actual conversations you ended up having. So that's column number two. Column number three is how many appointments did you set from your contact attempts to the conversations made? How many appointments? And then I also track social media videos that I post because that's another way that I am talking to multiple people at once instead of a one-on-one conversation, whether it's text or a phone call. So videos are my goal is 500 videos by the end of 2023. And that sounds like a lot. And I probably won't even hit that goal. But I wanted to I wanted to make some crazy high goals. That way I'm always pumping out some sort of content.
Right.
And then also, if you want, you can track closed, but I don't really like tracking lagging indicators because that's after the work is done. You can't change anything. That doesn't change your behavior. So you want to focus on leading indicators. And that's how many people did I even try to talk to? How many people responded? And how many appointments did I set? Every single day at a minimum. Like I can give you this tracker, but literally that's all that this is. Um, and then also from there, you can kind of dive like a little bit deeper. And awesome, yeah. Leslie, I'll hit up Ruben and I'll see if I can share it with you. So, and then in between, right? So in between from contact attempts to contacts received, divide the number. So I say you made 10 contact attempts on Friday, and 8 of them actually responded. 10 divided by 8, that's your conversion rate. So you can see how many people are actually responding. Maybe should I switch my method of how I am presenting this information? Should I switch the mode? Should I no longer call, or not no longer call, but should I maybe go to Facebook messages instead, or whatever it is? And then also do the same thing from the contacts that the conversations that you actually have to the appointments that you set. That number is always going to be slightly lower than people that just respond. It's easy to get a response and start a conversation than it is to set the appointment, right? So, but you can track. You can see how well is this going? Should I switch what I'm saying in order to get the appointment? And then videos is that's pretty much self-explanatory.
Well, they always say, you can't manage something that you can't measure, right? So I think that's really important to know your conversion. And again, mentally, it goes back to, okay, if I understand that I need to call 10 people to set one appointment, then it becomes a lot easier to get those 9 no's, right? Because I know that I'm just that much closer based on my personal conversion. And then, as you mentioned, Allie, it allows you to grow and adapt and make some changes and be a little bit more agile than if you weren't tracking that. So okay, so we know our hourly worth. We have our spreadsheet based on our personal conversions. What's next?
Yeah, actually, I want to add one more thing to that spreadsheet that I'm talking about and looking at right now. So every day of the week you have it, and then tally up all your numbers week after week, tally up all your numbers month after month, and then tally all your numbers year after year in the business. So that's how I was able to see that. Let me see my numbers here. my first year in the business, I had a goal of contact attempts 2,400. Attempt to talk to 2,400 people about real estate. I only did half of that, but hey, I still did 20 transactions.
That's still
So
more than probably a lot of people make attempts. So I wouldn't say,
yeah.
oh,
So yeah, so not don't just track day after day, but track the entire business. How did I do 2022 compared to 2023? So again, I'll reach out to Ruben and see if I can share it. If you guys want to reach out to me, either on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, Allie the agent, more than happy to help. And then, so for agents that already do have some background in the business, this is where it gets juicy. Okay, this is where I'm going to get to my hours. Like, yeah. So take every single transaction that you've ever had, and put it in a spreadsheet. Put the address on it or client name so that way you know which one it was. Put the sales price volume. And again, if you download this from like EXP's website, it gives you the Excel version of this anyway, so it's so much easier. But if you don't, I can send you my sanitized. I also have like a sanitized version of this, so that way you can plug and play. But pretty much put all of your transactions, the sales price, the GCI, how much you made, everything, and net, because I go by net, not GCI. And then highlight each one a different color, whether it was set listing that you had, a buyer that you had, or a referral that you had. So and then at that point, after you've divided up between those three, and by referrals, I mean outbound referrals, not inbound, because inbound, if I'm getting, a buyer client, then I still count that as a helping a buyer. So, add all of those up separately. So how much GCI total did you make from buyers, sellers, and referrals? How much net did you make total? And at that point, this is where it's going to be hard, but try to remember how much time you have spent with each client. And again, this is going to be easier for those that like have been in the business 1 year, like I was when I started doing this, as opposed to been in the business 12 years and what the heck, how am I supposed to remember something that happened 11 years ago? Then just
right.
do last year, just do last year. So at that point, make a little, and I can give you the spreadsheet. I scroll down to the bottom, and under each, like I have a section for each buyer, seller, referrals. And these are the hours that I calculate into how much time I'm spending with each person. So one, you have to commute. So hours driving to and from. In Tucson, you are driving a long time, believe it or not. It takes more than an hour to get from one side to the other side. No one ever thinks that. Property tours. How much time am I spending in each house? And how much are we lingering? How many houses do we go to? So property tours. 3 is negotiations. How much time am I spending with the cross agent in deciding whether this is a property we should offer on? Once we go under contract, how much time am I continuing to negotiate and go back and forth between the listing agent and the buyer client and any other party involved? Number 3 is communication with the buyers, or 4, communication with the buyers. Questions that they ask that you didn't already have covered in your videos. I have videos that cover every single step of the process. So only like one-off questions are really asked. I really don't have like too many questions because everything's already covered. Mm-hmm. And I've received good feedback from it. And then 5 is social media. How much am I posting about having helped this client? Or, if you do, mainly that's going to be higher on the listing side. And then how much time am I spending in inspections or anything like at the house or any other reason? And I have a last column that I had to add is disasters or like real estate emergencies, because something always happens, right? Like something always happens. The buyer no longer can close, and you have to deal with this and that. So I add an emergency column or disaster column. Add up all of those hours, and that's how many hours that you've spent with that one buyer client. Or I can go with the sellers too, pretty much driving, listing appointment, negotiations again, communication with seller, social media, inspections, photos, videoing if you video to market, and open houses if you're doing your open houses. add up all those, and that's how many hours you're spending per seller. And then for referrals, it's not as much. So the initial conversation to find the client, finding that how many hours, if hours, it takes you to find an agent, connecting the two. Do you happen to do any driving? I don't with that. Any comps that you might have to support or run. I have a column called emotional support, which probably should also be with sellers and buyers. Emotional support, negotiation period. I mean, you're not their agent. You're just referring them out. But also, I added a column of making sure that you get paid, because not all the time will the agents just freely pay you. I've realized in this business, so that also gets a column. So you add all that up, and that's how many hours that you spend per that one referral. So do that for every referral, every seller that you've had in the last year. And then add up, going back to the very top. Micah, this might be too late, but can I share my screen?
No, it's not too late. Go ahead.
Okay.
There should
Yeah,
be
absolutely.
a present button at the bottom. I think that you have that same capability.
Okay. Let me
Let's see if I do this.
Oh, present. There it is. Yep. Share screen. Don't show these tips again, whatever.
Hey guys, if you're watching this live and you're loving what Allie's saying, as I am, go ahead and give us a like and a heart, comment below if you have any questions, and we'll try to get to them.
Oh man, I can only share a window. I can't share an Excel, and these are in Excel.
Okay.
That's all right. You can message me for a copy of this, because I created this and I am more than happy to give this out. I will give out the sanitized version. But so anyway, you go back to, so you assign, after you have figured out how many hours individually you spent with each buyer, each seller, each referral, then add up the total. In total, last year, 2022, how many hours did I spend with buyers? Clump it all up. How many hours did I spend with sellers? Clump that all up. And how many hours did I spend with each referral? And then you take the GCI that you've highlighted already at the very top. How many? So for me, for example, I made in 2022, I made over 60,000 GCI from buyers, and then 50 GCI from sellers. So I'll go with the buyers first to keep this, try to make this as clean as possible. So you take your 60,000 from the GCI from buyers, divided by, for me, the average number of hours that I was working with each buyer was 36.25. So 36 hours that I was spending per buyer. Divide the two, and that you come up with 242 hours in 2022, $242 per hour working with a buyer. Now, my 2023 numbers show that it's $450 working with buyers, which is amazing because I've worked on my processes. And then, so you do the same thing with the sellers. How much am I making? The GCI divided by the total number of hours that you've worked with sellers. That's your hourly rate for seller. And then my favorite is GCI for the referrals, because working referrals is a lot less time consuming. I think the biggest time that I spent focusing on referrals was making sure that I got paid, not emotional support. It wasn't finding the agent. So 9 hours that I spent on average per each referral. So you take the GCI from referrals, divide it by 9 hours, and that's $260 an hour that you're making per referral. And at that point, when you see those three numbers, it's a lot of work to get those three numbers. But once you have those three numbers, you realize, wow, I thought I was making more with X, but really I make more with referrals. Or I didn't realize that buyers were so time consuming. Whatever you're going to find out, everyone's going to find something different, because it's your business. You run things the way that you want to. That is where you can focus your efforts from here on out. So, for example, say you really don't like working with buyers and you really like working with sellers. And that's where, you do make the most per hour with sellers. Stop working with buyers then. Just refer them out and spend more time on sellers or on whatever whatever you want to do, but I think also whichever one provides the most amount, because hopefully the two are aligned.
Right.
um,
And they
but
usually
at
are, I
least,
would imagine.
yeah. And at least that way you have awareness too. Like, yeah, I know that I don't make as much working with sellers, but I like working with sellers anyway. So at least that way you're just more cognizant of what's going on in your business. So more than happy to provide this. I also have like a ton of notes. It's more than just this too. I also included, well, some math in the beginning, like how many transactions that I need before you cap, because then at that point you make more, all the things. And then I also have done the same thing with agent attraction. So, yeah, it's, I don't know. I love numbers. I'm a nerd, but I made this spreadsheet uh, pretty easy to plug and play.
So let me ask you this, and I apologize if you've already answered it. So looking at buyers, sellers, referrals, and then agent attraction, for you personally, what has been the highest conversion is in terms of hourly worth?
Yeah, in order, it's working with buyers, then it's working with referrals, and then it's working listings. And I know why though, because you know how I have different columns for each activity. It was because
Mhm.
I was doing all the open houses because a couple of the sellers requested that me that I do the open houses. And it wasn't a conversation that I had prior to that saying, you know, open houses are pretty much to get buyer clients, not really to sell the house. Um, so I could track it down as to, oh, wow, I didn't realize I was spending that many hours with sellers. And I didn't realize that sellers were the lowest, you know, the lowest paying per hour for me and my business. So that's, yeah.
Thing. That's, I really like how you broke it down because you took it a step further from just knowing your hourly worth and diving it into buyers, sellers, referrals, which is absolutely incredible. And I would argue that everybody should have those numbers, even if it's not as in depth, but really allows you to be agile and make those adjustments, which I think has contributed greatly in your success. So no, I love it. And if there's anything that you're willing to share, if you don't mind, just posting the link below. Is there any other big ahas or takeaways or things that we didn't cover today that you think everyone should know?
Oh, good question. So I touched on doing something similar with agent attraction. Um, and I mean, I'm my background, I'm also an investor as well. So I got started investing before I even became an agent. So that was always like, you know, like my passive income and like, woohoo, and $100 per door, like, woohoo. uh, but now that I've like focused on agent attraction, my residual income has increased significantly. Last month, I made like, um, I think it was like 10 times more than the amount of all of my rental properties combined. And at that point, I mean, even before then, I knew that agent attraction is more fun helping other agents build their business as opposed to going over to my duplex again because the toilet clogged again, you know, like,
Right.
um, I don't know. So that's where I'm focused on. So I also have something similar for agent attraction. And I wanted to say one more thing. Now I'm blanking. It was back up. It
Well,
was
while you're
back.
thinking of that, I'll kind of piggyback off of that. Hamudi and I had a lot of rentals, anything from single family to commercial to apartment complexes, and then now absolute net leases. But that's very much something that we evaluated a few years ago was our apartment complex made a great deal of residual income, but the amount of hours that we were spending because we were the property managers. So between he and I was like, that's a full-time job. So how can we start leveraging that? So we went and sold the apartment complex, bought an absolute net lease, which made a little bit less on the surface, but when you look at the return on investment and then also return on time, there was
Mm.
hardly any time that we had to spend. So it freed up our time to now do other things and be able to duplicate that. So I think, in looking at all this, it goes full circle. You mentioned open houses for sellers, but maybe part of those open houses was also gaining some of the buyers. So I think you have to look at everything as a big picture as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so much more rewarding, I think, because I'm already an agent, you know, like how much more effort does it even take for me to talk to someone about what I'm doing to help them in their business? So return on time, yeah, 1000%. So that's why I'm focusing on like telling others that they could do the same thing instead of like hunting for an off deal market, off market property and analyzing and offering and then taking care of toilets. Yeah.
Well, you're creating systems and processes for people to duplicate, which I think is great. That's something that, Ruben's done a great job at, Shelby, your group, if you will, and then now you're doing the same thing. So I think that's absolutely incredible. Allie, for agents that are watching this, because I know you're growing your organization all over the country, all over the world, frankly, for agents that would love to participate in what you're doing and maybe learn from you and join your group, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm so active on Instagram. It's Allie the agent, and I put it in the parentheses here under my name. Allie spelled ALI, the agent with underscores. So that, or you can go to garcedrealty.com, but no one ever really knows how to spell Garced. It's GARCED. But you can the easiest thing would just be finding me on the gram, Allie the agent, or TikTok.
I love it. Awesome. Well, Allie, you're just a wealth of knowledge. I can't wait to continue to see your growth because you've done extremely well. We're so proud of you and blessed to be in business with you. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with everyone. And I know everybody loved it as much as I did.
Thank you, Micah, for having me on.
Thanks. Have a good rest of your Wednesday.
You too. Bye.